You're with Julian on the Rano and a review of a film that has won a number of Film of the Year lists. First Cow, which is directed by Kelly Reichardt, who is a director. I didn't review Certain Women. I haven't seen that film. But I did review 2010's Meek, Cutoff, which I liked. I love Michelle Williams. I think I gave it an 8 out of 10, and it was not quite a classic. It was a bit too empty for me. And 2013's Night Moves, I think I gave a better than 8 review. I thought that was a really strong film, really interesting subject matter about 3 eco-terrorists that go and destroy a dam and end up accidentally killing 2 people who were camping nearby. And I thought that was, Jesse Eisenberg was fantastic in that film, a really dark film. Less of that minimalism in that film. I thought it had a lot more substance to it. She's back with First Cow this year. A film that has got universal acclaim, and it stars John Magaro and Orion Lee. So at the start of the film, there's a woman walking in the wilderness. I think it's upstate Ohio, Northwest Pacific region, and she discovers 2 skeletons, sort of cuddling almost, lying in the ground. There's no other purpose to that moment. We then dive back into the past to find out what happened to these guys, played by John Magaro and Orion Lee. John Magaro at the start is a cook with a bunch of fur trappers who are mean, and he's quite weak and feeble, and he's travelling through the Oregon Trail wilderness sort of thing, and ends up in this tiny little town with no money and no idea where to go or what to do really. And at the start of the film, he encounters a naked Orion Lee in the forest, and Orion Lee says he's being chased by a bunch of Russians because during an altercation they killed his friend and he shot one of them. Don't know why he's hidden his clothes for some reason. Unless they were tracking him with a dog, that's never fully explained. Well, he's doing a bit better now, and he's got his own little shack with chickens and stuff, and he's very much later on, after he's been rescued, he manages to make his way back to his home. And John Magaro runs into him in this town, and Orion Lee's character is very thankful that this guy looked out for him when he had nothing. He fed him and he gave him clothes and he hid him from the other trackers and from the Russians. So he owes him a solid. And the 2 form a bond, which is they're both sort of travelling the wilderness in America, sort of like I think just after the Civil War or just before. And everyone's out there trying to make their fortune in sort of like the Pacific Northwest. Orion Lee's character has travelled the world, is Chinese, fluent in English, and has travelled all over the world, whereas John Magaro has just drifted from place to place, sort of on these trails, taking work as a chef, or he was in Boston as a baker. Their neighbour, a very wealthy man, gets the region's first cow, the titular first cow of the film, and they begin to steal milk from it at night. And the John Magaro character wants the milk not for drinking but for baking, because there's no access to milk up there at all, and he worked as a baker in Boston. He starts making these incredible biscuits, which Orion Lee's character then suggests that they take to market and sell, and they take off like hotcakes, because they are actually hotcakes, literally. And that starts them on the road to good fortune, and they start making money out of it. Unfortunately, the guy that owns the cow gets wind of it, and he doesn't have any idea they're stealing his milk, but he invites them to come and make this, incredible cake at his country manor so he can lord it over the other sort of dignitaries in the region and show how posh he is, which sets off a tragic chain of events. And I'll leave that up to you to watch. Now, this film has got incredible reviews, and like the film I just reviewed, I can't see why. There is no... I think film critics and music critics are the biggest sheep on earth. I think that they are too scared to ever get anything right or wrong themselves if they're in opposition to other people. I've never had that trouble. If I don't like Fetch the Bolt Cutters by Fiona Apple, I say I don't. If I don't like The Five Bloods, I say I don't. But critics seem to jump like sheep because they're so scared. So if they all read each other's reviews and want to make sure that they're in the group that gets it right and that they haven't got bad taste publicly. And the other thing they do is if they are greeted by something they don't understand, they're too scared to say that it isn't any good because they don't know. And with Kelly Reichardt's films, they're often slow and ponderous to a point of exhaustion. This one is. I didn't have that trouble so much with Meek's Cutoff, but this time I do. This film is interminably slow and without substance. It doesn't have meaningful symbolism. It doesn't have memorable imagery. The direction of each individual scene is perfunctory, and critics are just loading it with being an artistic work because they don't understand it. It doesn't have any substance to say that it's a work of art to me at all. It's a very small tale, and I can understand if it did have memorable moments or memorable images and stood out in that vein. It doesn't. It is, like, once the cookie thing happens, which is a good hour into the film, I'm pretty sure well over halfway, that whole sequence of them making money out of the cookies and it rising and then it all collapsing is good. It would be a really good half-hour film. This is a really good half-hour film spread over 2 hours, and there isn't enough to spread over 2 hours. The acting doesn't stand out at all. I didn't think the lead character by John Magaro did much apart from mope around, barely spoke, and didn't create a memorable character. Orion Lee, I think a possible debutante actor, was brilliant. He was the only character that I thought was memorable in the whole film or that stood out. He was very personable and I really liked him, and he hung everything together when he talked. He sort of verbalized things. On this showing, Kelly Reichardt just doesn't have a poetic eye when it comes to making films. She just makes things really slow and ponderous, and film critics are too scared to say that. But it is a really slow, ponderous film. It's not a bad film, but it isn't a very good one. I think that this has got a ridiculously high level of critical acclaim for a very rote story in the end. Like I said, once the whole cookie thing starts taking off, I was engaged, but I was also engaged because the rest of the film didn't engage me at all. And then it sort of peters out at the end into nothingness. So I am a fan of slow films and, the slow film movement and minimalism in films. And there are plenty of films where virtually nothing's happened, but it's been stylistically interesting, or it's had deeper poetic meaning or symbolism, or I've really felt the atmosphere. Nothing here does. The shot framing isn't interesting. There's no weight to anything that happens. None of the characters, apart from that one played by Orion Lee, are even interesting people. The lead character isn't a particularly good performance. The writing is next to non-existent. And it follows what is a diverting half-hour film for the course of 2 hours. And I'm sorry, but it just isn't a very good film. So I'm going to give First Cow, which a lot of people are saying is the best film of the year. No, it isn't. It is a diverting 6.5 out of 10 for First Cow. Don't believe the hype.